Looks like we're live. So, all right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nordic Startup and Entrepreneur Community's hashtag Livestream Thursday. And this is a weekly chat where we talk with entrepreneurs and startup founders from all over the Nordics to learn about their stories and journeys, both successes and failures. And this Thursday, I'm pleased to announce that we're joined by an entrepreneur from Finland, founder at Communicon, Bailey Lähdesmäki. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. And if anybody's watching live, we want you to comment below service time, so we know that you're here. And also, if you have any related questions for Bailey at any time during the stream, feel free to comment them below, and I will pass those along to Bailey during our conversation. So, Bailey, let's jump right into this. So maybe the best way to start this off would be to go through your background. If you can give a history of where you came from, what made you start a company in the Nordics, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I'm originally from the US, from California, Los Angeles, and it was about almost 10 years ago that I moved to Finland. And I moved after university, and the reason was love. My boyfriend was Finnish. So I came to Finland because of that. And what do you usually do when you move to Finland? Either you work or you study. So I studied again. And I studied in Joensuu, a little tiny town. Well, not so tiny now that you think about it, but it was a little bit of a culture shock coming from such a large city to a small community. And I started studying, and at the same time I started working. The way that I started working was through networking. I was taking a Finnish class, and one of the women in the class was pregnant. Okay. She was also American, so we got to talking. You know, the way people do when they're out of place and trying to assimilate. And she was going on maternity leave. They needed a replacement for international projects and training for companies. So I interviewed and I got the position. Nice. And that was about 9 years ago. Okay. Actually, almost 10 years ago. Yeah. Okay. And then I worked there for a while, and the company got sold. It got bought out by a larger corporation in Finland, by a Finnish consulting group, actually, FCG. Okay. And they were located in Joensuu, but they wanted to relocate everybody. And either I had to move to Lahti, and I wasn't finished with my studies, or I was unemployed. So for me, becoming an entrepreneur was out of necessity. It was kind of hard for a young female American without amazing Finnish language skills to be recruited in Joensuu. Right. So I don't have this amazing, lovely story of I was wanting to be an entrepreneur, my own boss for my whole life, and I was living my dream. It was out of necessity. Right. I think a lot of people's story starts that way, to be honest. True. And that's totally fine. So I started my company Communicon about 9 years ago, almost. And at the time, I was lucky enough that all of my clients wanted to continue with me. So I had a good clientele when I even started. For me, starting, I was alone. And one of the biggest support networks was the incubation and the business services in our area. Right. And for new entrepreneurs, whoever you can get to help you, to talk to you, to support you, to mentor you, do it. Do it. And it's not only because of the... Yeah.
No, sorry. Continue.
But it's not only about what they can provide for you in ways of information or even helping with the papers, especially if you're international and your Finnish skills aren't perfect. Right. But the support and the belief in yourself that they can provide for you, it's really invaluable.
And then what kind of support network was that? What organizations were those specifically? So you were in Joensuu. So what sort of network did you have there that could really help you?
In Joensuu, there was JOSEC, so the regional development company, as well as the science park, which is quite unique in the Joensuu region because most of the other areas have Technopolis, for example, but they
Right.
had their own business incubation services. And that was hugely helpful, especially if you've never started a business or you don't have a business background, because I had a design background. I had a cultural background. Well, I did have a business background, but not like, I'd never started a business before.
Right.
I knew about business. I knew about entrepreneurship because I had studied it in the university, but not real life experience. So having that kind of support was really, really beneficial. And of course, all of the other organizations, New Enterprise Agency, it was great when we got together and we started the Yeonsu Entrepreneurship Society,
Right.
and that's still going.
True.
And helping different people. So for me, those types of networks were really, really helpful. And just now they have the like Norten Uritet, the young entrepreneurs. They have the different regional entrepreneurship societies. But for me, those were a little bit hard to break into, partially because of the language barrier and partially because of the age gap. A lot of the people who are members of those organizations are a little bit older. When I started my company, I was 20.
Right.
So
true.
There's a bit of an age gap being 20 and a student, and not
small
finished.
little town.
Compared,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the main point is to find a community or kind of a tribe that can support you and really give you that feeling of not being alone. I think I've talked to many entrepreneurs, many startups, pre-startups, and they that's one of the biggest battles that they have is how to not feel alone in this journey.
So your
and it
advice
doesn't matter if you are
so your advice is to just get out into the community, start telling your idea, get people to help you out because people have different skills that they know maybe better than you do, and sort of build that community around yourself, even if you don't know anybody.
Even if you don't know anybody, join your local entrepreneurship society, go to the Chamber of Commerce, just go to these different events, because meeting face to face is you're already getting over the first hurdle.
Right.
And it's the same thing in other Nordic countries. They have meetups, they have tons of different networking events. Even if you just, for example, there's Nordic Business Forum / even if you can't afford a ticket, at least go to the area and hang out at a restaurant, hang out at a bar there.
Right.
Because everybody's already there.
True. That's true. That's networking at its finest, I guess.
Exactly. Free networking.
So how did this all? So you're in Yeonsu. So you had this sort of network you built around yourself. How did you start getting into the industry that you're doing with Communicon? And you've been doing it for a while. So could you tell a little bit about the company and what you're doing specifically?
I would be happy to. So 10 years ago, I studied as a service designer when service design was not a thing. It's only become a thing, buzz, in the last few years. So picture this in your mind, a young American, non-Finnish speaking woman coming to a large company saying, I'd like to help you improve your services in Finland.
Right.
So that wasn't that didn't go over too well, because first you had to explain why service is important. A lot of the responses I got were, our machine works. That's enough. But why should you build customer intimacy? Why should you care about your user experience? Why should you care about the purchasing path or the purchasing decisions? Why should you care about your customers' values? Why should you make personas? Why should you make service blueprints? So it was also a struggle to teach them why you need your services. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs or even salespeople in general will go through this challenge. So I started in service design, and I realized that it took a lot to kind of convince people about that. So I went back to my oldie but goodie of communication training. And that was very successful, and I'm still doing it to this day. I've been a trainer for over 12 years now, And I've trained everything from basic English all the way up to huge presentations in front of thousands of people. And I focus on not only the language, but also the nonverbal communication. So body language, facial expressions, stance, posture, tone of voice. And that's been very successful, and I'm still doing it, as I said, to this day. And that got into larger projects when you kind of get your foot into the door. So I used these courses and these trainings as a way to get into the company and to try to change their mindset into understanding why service would be important. So that led to a lot of larger projects. So one advice to other entrepreneurs is that even if you have your goal of your this is what I can do, this is the greatest thing, you might need to have a door opener. You might need to have something that you get your foot into the door first. And it doesn't have to be what you want to do in the future. Most of my business in the beginning was this type of training, these types of educational courses. And only in the last few years, I've been getting a lot more bigger projects. And the way that it has evolved is to have internationalization projects. It's been maybe in the last 5 years that more companies are realizing, we can start exporting to other countries. And if we want to export, we should do it right.
Right.
So I've gotten into a lot of those bigger projects of doing the market research and then tailoring their product or service for the international markets. And a lot of it is service-based. So that's where my service design background comes in.
And in the beginning, when you started talking to these companies, so how did you first get in front of them, for one, and then how did you second sort of convince them that, yeah, this lady knows what she's talking about, we got to get her on board? So I mean, so what were those kind of aspects, and how did you go through those?
As I said in the beginning, when I was trying to sell service design services, it was really difficult because people didn't know it and they didn't value it. So it was too big of a hurdle to get over. So I went back, as I said, to the oldie but goodie of language and presentation training. And that was a little bit easier to sell because everybody wants to improve their communication skills. And every company will need that if they're going to be working internationally or even in Finland, because body language is universal. So that was a bit easier to sell. And one of the best ways that I did that was at events. The reason I suggest events to almost everybody is because, as I mentioned, you already get over the first difficulty of securing a face-to-face meeting. A lot of people are much better presenting face-to-face. And when you're face-to-face, you have the whole communication package. Because, if you're typing an email, it's only 7% of communication that is conveyed through words, compared to 48% that's also tone of voice. So it's the tone of the word that make a big difference. And it's when you meet face to face, you already have your first meeting, so you don't need to do all of those cold calls. It saves a lot of time and a lot of effort. One of the ways that I suggest to my client, or one of the things I suggest to my clients, is to do this because you're fishing in a pool of hungry fish. So I would go to you don't need to go and try to bait the line. So I go to a lot of events, and it's much easier there to sell your services. And for me, selling communication services was like, oh, okay, tell me about your company. Okay, great. Would you like to learn how to present your company and yourself better? There you go.
Yeah.
First situation.
And you got them in the spot where they're already trying to push the company on you, and they're like, oh no, did I do something wrong? Could this be better? Yeah, true.
And of course it can be better. And especially for these companies which are already at events, they're trying to put themselves out there. And most of those companies will be going to international events because, let's be honest, the Finnish market is relatively small. So these companies are already going to be going to international events.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, if you want to present your company in international events, you most likely need to be speaking English.
Mm. So
So
then, yeah. So the events makes perfect sense for the whole improving your communication and going international and all that stuff. Did you need any investment in the beginning? How was your funds in the beginning? Did you require really any upfront investment, or was it mostly just communicating that they need to use your service and immediately getting paid? I mean, how did that work out in the beginning?
I was all self-funded, and as I mentioned, I was lucky enough to have all of my clientele move with me from my previous job. So I had pretty good financing from the very beginning.
Right.
After a little while, of course, you need to find bigger clients and more projects,
Mm.
and those are just your normal running costs. Those are your sales costs, your marketing costs.
Right.
For me, it was also important to cultivate my network because a lot of consulting is word of mouth. It's a recommendation. Oh, we had a great course with her, or she really helped us to launch into a new market,
Mhm.
or she wrote really good copy for
Mm.
us. So
Right.
a lot of it is word of mouth, and that's why going to these events was also very helpful for me.
Right. And has everything been so? I mean, it sounds like the path has been going very, very well. So it was very clear. You knew what you wanted to do. You went out there, you talked to the people, you got the clients, and you continued forward. Has there been any sort of downs as well as the ups that
Um,
that you learned from or had to go through?
yes, because I did move from Joensuu.
Hmm.
So when I was in Joensuu, I had a great network, very involved in the community, in different organizations. So it was a very solid foundation.
Hmm.
However, then I moved to Kuopio after working in Jyväskylä and studying in Jyväskylä because I did my master's there in international business and entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
So that was also very good because I got a lot of contacts through there. But then relocating to Kuopio, permanently,
Hmm.
you need to start everything again.
Right.
And the other difficulty I had was a lot of my projects are EU or ELU funded, or now
Hmm.
what is Business Finland, and the funding periods change. They're
Okay.
the times.
Hmm.
So when that period is up, the funding is up for that project. So it
Hmm.
creates that need to find new customers, new projects all over again with new funding requirements and new instruments because they're changing all the time.
Right.
So that can be a little challenging. The other challenge that I had was that I had a baby.
Okay.
I
Right.
I went on maternity leave, which
Right.
is a normal part of most
Life.
humans' lives. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Uh, the difficulty with that, though, in Finland is although that they have very good maternity leave and parental support, for entrepreneurs, no one pays the company. So the company
Hmm.
still has running costs, but you have no income.
Of course.
So that provided a little bit of a challenge of
Yeah.
how to secure that before going on maternity leave. So I think a lot of I don't know, single entrepreneurs or small companies, they face that challenge also. So that was a challenge for me, and I was away for a while and trying to get more clients back after that. It required a big sales and marketing push.
Right. And keeping that motivation after having a baby, and I mean that right there is a huge emotional journey. And how did you keep, like, what really drives you as an entrepreneur to continue forward and to continue getting more clients and keep expanding the business? What really drives you personally?
There are 2 points to that. The first thing is that life totally changes after you have a child, and it,
Hmm.
it will change no matter what kind of life situation you have, whether you are with a partner or if you're a single parent, or if the parent, the other, if your partner is at home or traveling, or whether you have a support network with around you.
Hmm.
Um, but you know that saying that entrepreneurs have a 24-hour workday. Well,
Mm.
with a small child, you really can't. So, you know,
True. True.
you really
Yeah.
can't. it would be before that I would take some freelancing copywriting jobs or branding jobs that I could do on off hours.
Mhm.
But now it's just not possible. So you don't have that extra income that you
Right.
might have had previously. And of course, it for me as an internationalization consultant, it requires me to travel with my clients. And I love doing that. I love doing that. Going from the whole process, from the beginning of doing the market research of which markets they should enter, how they should tailor their product or service for that market, doing the marketing plan and strategy, launching, and then really starting to build up the sales and marketing and getting the feedback.
Right.
That requires me to travel with them. And that's why I'm in the US now, actually.
Yeah.
So
and do you have your kid with you now, or do you have someone taking care of your kid at home, or?
yeah, he's at home. He's at home.
Okay.
So that presents a challenge, but at the same time, you really need to follow through with your clients and continue to support that customer intimacy.
Mhm.
You want to see the journey completed. You want to see your clients flourish. You want to see them really succeed. And it's also
Definitely.
very helpful to have someone support them while they are internationalizing. Someone who they trust, someone who they can rely on. So when I travel with them, whether they're in their negotiations with their own customers or whether they're visiting some different kinds of events here or conferences, seminars, expos, it really helps them to have that backup support.
Definitely.
So that is challenging, yes.
And do you have anybody in the industry and in your industry that kind of inspires you, that you kind of look for as maybe as like a guiding star, North Star, or something like that? Is there anything there, or is it just mostly you make your own path and you inspire yourself in a way? I mean, how does it work with you?
I think it depends a little bit on which area of business you mean. If it's the internationalization, then of course there are gurus all over the world. But for training, I approach it as a service. So for me, having a course is it's a service. And I think one of my most popular courses was Best Beers.
Okay.
The reason I started this is because I realized from a service point that there was the need for English training that was enjoyable. And one of the barriers that people have with English training is that there's a lot of fear. So when you are able to alleviate that fear by providing something enjoyable and something safe, like, drinking beer,
Right.
It really allows them to change their association with speaking in English. It changes it to be something more enjoyable, something that they like to do. And for me, that kind of deep change in mindset or attitude is more important than memorizing 200 vocabulary words.
Right. Yeah.
Then it'll be some kind of lifelong learning journey.
Right.
So there isn't really any specific person that I could say that inspires me in that way. But I love the Montessori type of training where people really get their hands dirty, but they get more in depth with different senses. So I think for me that was definitely key for inspiration.
Cool. And then what advice would you give somebody who's going into the service industry and just starting off? Maybe they have some idea in the service industry and they know the market they want to go to, they know the type of clients they want, but what would you recommend for them to do first, starting up in the very beginning?
Starting up in the very beginning?
Yeah.
Find someone who can help you. Find someone who can help you to understand what are the markets, what kind of positioning there is, what kind of competitive environment, and then how you need to tailor or adapt your product or service, or for the service in that industry. Because sometimes a company will have their heart set on entering a specific market, but there might be no need, or there might just be too tough competition. So it might not be the correct market to enter.
Very good point.
And then to do the actual market research of what do the customers want in that market? What are the trends? And at the same time, you're doing that market research to build up your contact network.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it gets back into the networking, when they should talk to you, because you know all about the networking and speaking. So, I mean, let's get into because you teach people to speak English better, to do sales better, to get their I guess their sort of sales pitch going in a better direction. Yeah. So what do you recommend for people who are maybe not so skilled in that area? What should they do to maybe feel a little bit more confident when they're going to talk to their first customers? Yeah, how do they improve that? And it's a big question.
It's a big question. I always suggest thinking about what is your audience? Who are you going to be talking to? And what do you want from that discussion? What do you want from that presentation? Do you want to simply transfer information? Do you want to create some feeling or emotion? Do you want to create some action?
Right.
So if you are really good, you do all three. But to think about what is the purpose of that presentation and to whom it is for. If it's going to be to investors, you're going to have a different message. If it's going to be to potential customers, it's going to be a different message. If it's going to be to partners or people who will support you, it'll be a different message. So you'll use different techniques for that. You might be more confident, or you might be more, I don't know if you can say wimpy, but people like to help other people. So if you're more vulnerable, people are more likely to help you if you're looking for partners or support network.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. All right.
So it's about the audience and what you want from that presentation.
Cool. And if anybody has any questions for Bailey, on the bottom, you can feel free to comment even after this live stream. But right now, we just hit the 30-minute limit, so we are about done for today. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Bailey, for joining us. You can join us every single Thursday, where we have another live stream chat with another entrepreneur from somewhere in the Nordics. So thank you again, Bailey. Thank you, Nordic Startup people, and everybody have a good weekend. See you next week.
Thank you.